Mani Tiru.
Good afternoon, ladies. Can you hear me okay?
Please present.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to have 15 minutes of your time. My name is Mani. I lead the space and satellite business for Amazon Web Services across Asia Pacific. I'm part of a global team that helps build space and satellite companies on AWS cloud. Now, when I say space, how many of you think of space as the final frontier, something far, far away up there in a galaxy that you probably just dream of? Okay, how many of you think of Matthew McConaughey or George Clooney or Matt Damon? We all have our preferences. I'm not judging. How many of you think of Star Trek or Star Wars, sci-fi movies? How many of you think of aliens? Now, these are the usual associations with space. Deep space exploration is what has fired up our imaginations and fill us with awe. This is a picture of NASA's 2020 Mars Perseverance rover. It's literally on the surface looking for signs of past microbial life, soil samples to prepare us one day to set foot on Mars. But space is much, much more than this. You may not realize it, but space-derived activities and services underpin much of the world's economic, environmental, and national security. Even our day-to-day lives. Rockets take up satellites into orbit, and these enable our communications and data networks, your phones, your ride-sharing services like Uber, weather forecasting, emergency services, even your geolocation dating apps. Importantly, in these heightened times of geopolitical tension, satellites also play a key role in underpinning our defense capability, routing aid where aid is required. And of course, I'm going to share how we can use space tech to look after Mother Earth, because 50% of essential climate change variables can only be measured from space. Morgan and Stanley estimate that the space industry will be worth $1 trillion by 2040. From a skills and job perspective, I really want you to be aware of the potential that you have in this emerging new economy. It may delight you to know that Poland has actually signed an agreement to launch the first constellation of satellites with the European Space Agency. The constellation will consist of at least 4 satellites, 3 electro-optical, and 1 radar working as one system. I'll explain what all this means as we keep going. The president of the Polish Space Agency has also said Poland's presence on the moon is in a matter of 10 years. Several months ago, the Polish Space Agency made a call for concepts for a national space mission, and the moon featured heavily in responses. If you don't know, the Polish space sector today consists of about 400 entities. These are companies and academic institutes, and they employ about 12,000 people in the space sector in Poland. So what does the space industry look like? This is a highly simplified diagram, and I'm showing you what the value chain looks like. I've broken it down as it relates to cloud technologies. That is the technology that we build, that I help companies build solutions on. So typically you'll find that folks are either upstream or downstream. Upstream basically means you're building a satellite, building a spacecraft, you're launching it into the ether. Once it's launched, it needs to connect to a ground station or ground operating systems. And essentially what happens then is you're downlinking information. Satellites carry very sophisticated sensors. We talked before about radioelectric, RF. These sensors have very sophisticated algorithms, which we can then use to look at the images and derive information from what we are gathering through those image capture. Oftentimes, they're high in resolution, and there's a very big frequency or high cadence of repeat around the Earth. So there's lots of information being collected about the planet at all times. So here's a thing to understand about space. Space is essentially data, and space data is big data. So what do we need for big data manipulation? Cloud computing services like machine learning, like artificial intelligence, like IoT, high performance computing. These are typical services that we use to analyze the data that we're picking up from space. For those of you who are not so familiar with cloud is essentially you rent your infrastructure or IT services and you pay as you go on basis demand. And what does the space industry offer? What does cloud do for the space industry? Essentially the same technologies that we use in banks for the higher education sector, in health. It's the same value proposition that applies to the space sector. It's to focus on mission rather than the complexities of looking after technology systems. This is a super quick overview of what the fundamental business. The fastest way I can help you understand is by sharing some examples of companies, new space companies that have emerged in the last 4, 5, 6 years, all new. 4, 5, 6 years, all new. What is it? Everything you need to understand for a farmer is actually visible and available on a tablet or a mobile device. That all there that to farmers' profitability and productivity. This company today looks after 28,000 farms in Australia, and they're moving out of Australia to support farmers across the globe. So satellite imagery for agriculture, for food security over the next decade is going to be a huge use of technologies in cloud, big data, AI, ML. These are the kind of skill sets that we need to design products and services that are actually going to make an impact to community. So that's one example. Second example, we can also use satellite imagery to fight fires. Now, climate change, as you know, has led to a devastating increase in the frequency of wildfires. This is across the US, Australia, Spain, Portugal, Greece. There's massive loss of land and property, huge evacuations and chaos that's caused when a wildfire breaks out. Now, you might find it interesting. It takes typically 60 to 90 minutes before a wildfire is detected. By then, it's too late. The wildfire is already on its way. It's causing massive amounts of damage and destruction. But through the use of satellite imaging, we can actually set up monitoring systems. So there's companies, this particular company is again out of Australia. There's another company in Germany called Aurora Tech. Both these companies are leveraging the ability to have sensors in the sky, IoT devices on the ground, cameras that are constantly mapping what's happening on parched earth, on areas that are prone to fires. And what is possible now is with using a combination of technologies, it's actually possible to get detection or a fire alert within 3 minutes of a smoke signal. That's a massive step change in how we deal with calamities, how we handle disasters. And the same methodology can be applied to flooding, to tsunamis, to all sorts of natural disasters. So again, use of space technology that is actually being redirected to protect Earth. This is another company. This particular one is out of India, and they've extended the concept of using satellite imagery, real-time satellite imagery, to extend to disaster relief efforts. In case of a flooding, where does aid need to go? Where is the first bit of mitigation or remediation needs to take place. India in particular is facing severe consequences due to climate change. Droughts and floods are consistent. And in the agriculture sector, many insurance companies actually fail to provide small subsistence farmers with timely and fair compensation for their losses. So what this company does is they not only look after the environment and are able to predict when there's going to be a flooding or if there's a flooding, they can help the farmer and the bank understand a farmer lost his crop, not through negligence or not doing their relative fair of work, but because a disaster has happened. And basically this means they've started looking at insurance solutions. So farmers, financial security, crop insurance, banks are starting to get involved. So Rabobank, ICICI Bank in India, these are the companies that are now using satellite imaging to look at disaster relief, to look at insurance management and inclusive finance for the poorest amongst us. A completely different example, this particular one from Korea. Again, use of space tech for looking after the Earth. This one for the oceans. Last week, Korea launched a couple of different satellites. One is with a multispectral camera, and one is with a polarized camera. None of these might not mean much to you, but basically what they do is they allow the ability to look at the ocean. So basically, you're monitoring your entire marine resources and operations. And the multispectral camera can identify the location of ships. It can identify a red tide in the ocean, algae. So the city, Korea, Busan, Seoul, they're expecting to collect marine data sets like the absorption of carbon dioxide. The polarized camera actually can also detect things like fine dust, so air pollution. These are tremendous examples of how satellite technology again is being used to monitor.
Znowu mamy przykład wykorzystania technologii satelitarnej do monitorowania Ziemi, ale także działania na rzecz obywateli. Mam nadzieję, że te przykłady zainspirują Państwa do tego, aby o przestrzeni kosmicznej myśleć trochę szerzej. To nie jest tylko kwestia eksploracji odległej przestrzeni kosmicznej dla astronautów, ale jest to też okazja przyjrzenia się Ziemi, temu, co jest na dole. Technologia, która może nam jako społeczeństwu pomóc. Wybrałem te przykłady z Azji, bo to jest obszar działania moich klientów, ale w naszym dziale są też liczne przykłady moich kolegów z Europy. Jest ich wiele. Mam nadzieję, że da Wam to dobry obraz zrozumienia tego, jak Wasze umiejętności w technologii można nakierować. Można nauczyć się tych umiejętności analizy danych, obsługi danych, syntezy danych. Tego wszystkiego można się nauczyć z Future Colors. Można też uczestniczyć w kursach. To było bardzo krótkie wprowadzenie.
I realize it's only 15 minutes, but I'm happy to take questions or connect with you afterwards to chat more. Thank you so much for listening.